Dear soul who listens to me now, Archangel Gabriel brought me to you in this sacred moment. He knows that you carry in your chest a silent pain that no one else can see. Gabriel showed me how you look at that man and feel something so deep, so real, that it hurts. But when you search for signs from his side, you find only coldness, distance, maybe even indifference. And this leaves you confused, questioning if you're imagining things, if you're being foolish to believe that something special exists between you two. Archangel Gabriel allows me to see you, my dear. I see how you spend sleepless nights analyzing every word he said, every look you exchanged, every moment when he seemed to get closer only to pull away again. I see how you wonder if you're wasting your time, if you're throwing away your precious love on someone who might never be able to return it. This pain you feel is not small. It's the pain of a soul that loves deeply, but finds no echo in the outside world. But today, Gabriel sends me with a revelation that will transform your understanding of this situation. What you need to understand is that many men, when faced with true and deep love, panic. Yes, dear, real panic. It's not that they don't feel the love. It's that they feel so much that it scares them. Imagine a person who lived their whole life believing that fire burns and suddenly finds a flame that warms without hurting. The first reaction isn't to embrace the fire, it's to pull back, distrust, question if that's real or a dangerous illusion. Gabriel shows me a story that will touch your heart. There was a woman named Maria, 52 years old, who worked for years alongside a colleague named John. She always felt a special connection with him, an energy that pulsed between them, as if they were two parts of the same soul. But John always kept his distance. He spoke to her only when necessary, avoided being alone with her, and when she tried to make conversation, he responded curtly and coldly. Maria began to feel rejected, humiliated, questioning if she was creating a fantasy in her mind. What Maria didn't know is that John came home every day thinking about her. He dreamed of her, imagined conversations he'd like to have, but when he was near her, his heart raced so much that he went into protection mode. John had been hurt in the past, had trusted his heart before, and been betrayed. When he felt the force of love that Maria awakened in him, his first reaction was to build walls, because truly loving meant becoming vulnerable again. Gabriel reveals to me that this is the first hidden truth you need to understand. When a man acts with excessive coldness, when he seems to be fighting against his own feelings, it's often because those feelings are so intense they scare him. They weren't taught to deal with vulnerability the same way we women were. Since childhood, they learned that showing deep feelings is a sign of weakness, that surrendering completely is dangerous. The Archangel shows me that you've probably already noticed some signs, but dismissed them as insignificant. When he quickly looks away after staring at you for a few seconds, when he gets nervous in your presence, when he remembers small details about you that you mentioned casually, these are signs that you affect him in a way he can't control. An indifferent man doesn't pay attention to details, doesn't get nervous, doesn't need to look away. Gabriel whispers to me that there's a fundamental difference between rejection and fear. Rejection is cold, definitive, without hesitation. Fear is contradictory, full of mixed signals, of approach and withdrawal. When a man feels fear of love, he can be gentle one moment and distant the next. He might seek your company indirectly, but when you're close, he acts like he doesn't care. This contradictory behavior isn't cruelty, it's internal war. Think about how many times you felt there was something unspoken between you, a tension in the air you couldn't explain. How many times you noticed he seemed to want to say something but stayed silent. How many times you noticed he acted differently when you were alone compared to when other people were around. These are the hidden signs that Gabriel wants you to recognize. The Archangel shows me that your feminine intuition isn't wrong. We women have a natural ability to feel emotional energies that men often don't even realize they're emitting. When you feel there's something special between you, there probably is. The question isn't whether he feels it, but whether he'll be able to overcome his fears, to honor that feeling. Gabriel tells me that the first step to healing your pain is to stop interpreting his coldness as lack of love. Often, coldness is the way a man finds to protect himself from a love he feels is too big for him to handle. It's as if he told himself that if he can keep distance, maybe he won't have to face the truth of his feelings. Archangel Gabriel asks me to dive deeper into the mysteries of the masculine heart, because there are signs you're seeing, but not interpreting correctly. He shows me that when a man is fighting against love, he can't completely hide his feelings. They leak through small gestures, stolen glances, moments of carelessness where the mask falls for a few seconds. Gabriel reveals to me that you need to learn to read a different language, a language that isn't made of sweet words or romantic declarations, but of contradictions, tensions, moments where he almost surrenders but pulls back at the last second. It's as if he's constantly fighting with himself, and you're witnessing this internal war without knowing that's what's happening. Let me tell you about Anna, a 48-year-old woman that Gabriel showed me. Anna worked at a company where she met Roberto, a man who seemed completely indifferent to her. Roberto never greeted her warmly, never started conversations, never showed personal interest. Anna began to feel invisible, insignificant. But the Archangel showed me what Anna couldn't see. Roberto always chose the table closest to hers in the cafeteria, always found reasons to pass by her department, always offered help when she seemed overwhelmed, but always casually, almost carelessly. What Anna didn't know is that Roberto spent weekends imagining what he would say to her on Monday. But when the moment came, the words simply wouldn't come out. He found her so special that he was afraid that if he opened his heart, she would discover he wasn't enough for her. So he kept a safe distance, but couldn't avoid orbiting around her like a planet around the sun. Gabriel whispers to me that this is the nature of masculine love when it's scared. They can't stay away, but they also can't get completely close. It's as if they're trapped in an emotional gravitational field, always being pulled closer, but fighting against this force because they don't know how to deal with it. The Archangel shows me the hidden signs you should observe when he falls silent in your presence, but it's the kind of silence loaded with tension, not indifference. When he offers to help you with tasks that aren't his responsibility. When he remembers things you said weeks ago, details that an indifferent person would never store in memory. When he seems uncomfortable when other men talk to you, even if he tries to disguise it. Gabriel reveals to me that there's a crucial difference between a man who doesn't care and a man who cares too much. The indifferent man is consistently cold, doesn't waste time with you, doesn't pay attention to details of your life. But the man who loves and is afraid is inconsistent, contradictory. He can be cold for days and suddenly have a moment of kindness that leaves you confused. He might ignore you in front of other people, but when you're alone, he becomes more relaxed, more himself. The Archangel shows me that many men develop what he calls defensive love. They love, but build defenses so high that love is hidden even from themselves. It's as if they said, if I don't admit I love, then I can't be rejected. If I don't surrender, then I can't be hurt. But true love doesn't disappear just because they decide to ignore it. It finds ways to manifest, even through the barriers they built. Gabriel tells me about Sandra, 55 years old, who had been in love with her neighbor Carlos for 3 years. Carlos was always polite, but distant. He never accepted her invitations for coffee, never initiated long conversations. Sandra had already given up mentally, thinking he simply wasn't interested. But the Archangel showed me what Sandra didn't notice. Carlos always found excuses to be in the garden when she arrived from work. He always offered help when she was carrying heavy groceries. He always asked if she was okay when he saw her worried. What Sandra didn't know is that Carlos had lost his wife 5 years ago and had promised himself he would never get emotionally involved with anyone again. But when he met Sandra, he felt something that scared him deeply. He began breaking his own promise without realizing it, caring for her discreetly, worrying about her, but always maintaining a distance he considered safe. Gabriel reveals to me that this is the pattern of masculine love when blocked by fear. They care through action, not words. They protect through presence, not declarations. They demonstrate through small gestures that might go unnoticed if you're waiting for grand romantic displays. The Archangel whispers to me that you need to learn to see love in the way he worries about your safety, even if he disguises it as casual concern. In the way he stays alert to your problems, even if he doesn't offer solutions directly. In the way he remembers your tastes, your preferences, your important dates, even if he never mentions that he remembers. Gabriel shows me that there are men who express love through silent protection. They don't say, I love you, but they make sure you get home safely. They don't say, you're special, but they treat you differently from how they treat other people. They don't say, I think about you, but they appear exactly when you need help most. The Archangel reveals to me that your feminine heart already recognizes these signs, but your rational mind dismisses them as coincidence or politeness. Gabriel wants you to trust your intuition more, and your need for external confirmation less. When you feel there's something special between you, there usually is. The question isn't whether he feels it, but when he'll have the courage to honor that feeling. Archangel Gabriel asks me to reveal now the deepest truth about what happens inside a man's mind when he's in love, but afraid. He shows me that there's a fierce battle happening inside him, a war between the heart that wants to surrender and the mind that insists on protecting itself. This war isn't silent, dear. It has signs. It has consequences. And if you know how to observe, you can clearly see when a man is living this internal conflict because of you. Gabriel tells me about Lucia, a 51-year-old woman who was madly in love with Miguel, her friend for 2 years. Miguel was kind, helpful, always available when she needed him, but never took a step beyond friendship. Lucia felt like she was on an emotional roller coaster. One day, Miguel was affectionate, talked about the future as if she were part of it, treated her as if she were the most important person in the world. The next day, he was distant, formal, talking only about work and weather. What Lucia didn't understand is that Miguel was living what Gabriel calls the torment of denied love. On days when he was affectionate, Miguel had let his guard down, had allowed his true feelings to show. But afterward, alone at home, fear hit with full force. He remembered his ex-wife, who had left taking half his belongings and all his trust. He remembered how devastated he had felt, promising never again to put himself in that position of vulnerability. The Archangel reveals to me that this is the nature of masculine internal war. It's not a simple, rational decision between loving or not loving. It's a daily struggle between the desire to connect and the terror of being hurt. It's as if he had two voices in his head. One saying, "She's special, you deserve to be happy, take the risk," and another screaming, "Remember the pain, remember the betrayal, protect yourself at any cost." Gabriel shows me that when a man is in this internal war, he develops very specific behaviors you can learn to recognize. He might get irritated for no apparent reason, especially after moments of closeness with you. This irritation isn't with you, it's with himself, for having let his guard down, for having felt something he promised not to feel again. It's as if he's angry at himself for being weak enough to fall in love. The Archangel tells me about Elena, 49 years old, who was confused by Fernando's behavior. Whenever they had a deep conversation, a real connection, Fernando would disappear for a few days. Elena thought she had done something wrong, that she had been too invasive. But Gabriel showed me that Fernando wasn't running from her. He was running from the intensity of his own feelings. Each deep conversation made him realize how much she meant to him, and that terrified him. Gabriel reveals to me that there are clear signs of this internal war you can observe. When he acts contradictory from one day to another, it's not because he's playing with your feelings. It's because he's trying to find a balance between his heart and his fears. When he makes sarcastic or ironic comments about relationships, especially in your presence, it's not because he doesn't believe in love. It's because he's trying to convince himself he doesn't need love to be happy. The Archangel shows me that many men develop self-sabotage strategies when they're in love but afraid. They might start talking about other women in front of you, not because they're interested in them, but because they're testing if you'll show jealousy, if you really care. It's a tortuous way of seeking confirmation without having to expose themselves directly. Gabriel tells me about Carmen, 53 years old, who was devastated whenever her friend Paulo talked about other women. She interpreted this as total disinterest on his part, but the Archangel showed me that Paulo was actually desperate to know if Carmen felt jealous, if she cared about him. Since he didn't have the courage to ask directly, he used this painful and immature strategy of provoking jealousy to discover her feelings. The Archangel reveals to me that there are moments when their mask falls completely, moments when the internal war stops and true love appears without filters. Usually this happens in crisis situations, when you're sad, sick, or facing some serious problem. In these moments, his protective instinct speaks louder than fear, and you can see who he really is beneath all the defenses. Gabriel shows me that you need to learn to recognize these moments of truth, when he appears out of nowhere to comfort you, when he cancels other commitments to be with you when you need him, when he shows concern that goes far beyond normal politeness. These are the moments when the internal war stops, and love temporarily wins over fear. The Archangel tells me about Beatrice, 46 years old, who had given up on Ricardo. For 2 years, he maintained a just friends posture, never gave clear signs of romantic interest. But when Beatrice got sick, Ricardo showed up every day at the hospital. He brought homemade food, spent hours talking, held her hand when she was in pain. In that moment of her vulnerability, all his defenses crumbled, and Beatrice could see the true love he felt. Gabriel reveals to me that masculine internal war isn't eternal. It has a breaking point, a moment when love becomes bigger than fear, but this moment usually doesn't come alone. It needs signs that it's safe to love you, that you won't hurt him, that you're different from the people who hurt him in the past. The Archangel whispers to me that your role isn't to conquer him or convince him. Your role is to remain firm in your own energy of love, showing through your actions that you're a trustworthy person, that you won't use his feelings against him. When he realizes you're a safe harbor, the internal war will begin to lose strength. Archangel Gabriel brings me now the most important message of all, the one that will transform not only your understanding, but your entire love life from now on. He shows me that you've reached a crucial choice point. You can continue torturing yourself, trying to decipher his every gesture, or you can choose the path of divine feminine wisdom, which is to love without conditions, without guarantees, without needing external confirmation to know your own worth. Gabriel reveals to me that your journey with this man, regardless of the final outcome, is serving a much greater purpose. You're learning to love in a purer, higher, more mature way. You're discovering that true love doesn't depend on being reciprocated to be real and transformative. This is a lesson that few human beings manage to learn, and you're being prepared for a level of love that transcends the limitations of ego. The Archangel tells me about Margarita, a 54-year-old woman who spent 5 years loving a man who lived in this internal war. During all that time, she suffered, questioned herself, felt rejected. But one day, Gabriel whispered in her ear the same truth he whispers to you now. Stop trying to be loved, and start simply loving. Margarita then completely changed her energy. She stopped looking for signs, stopped analyzing behaviors, stopped diminishing herself to fit into his emotional limitations. Instead, Margarita focused on radiating unconditional love. She treated everyone with the same kindness, including him, but without expectations. She built a full life, with friends, hobbies, personal projects. She became a complete, fulfilled person who loved because that was her nature, not because she needed something in return. And you know what happened? 3 months later, the man who had resisted for 5 years showed up at her door, confessing he couldn't live without her anymore. Gabriel reveals to me that this is the power of centered feminine energy. When you stop chasing, when you stop trying to prove your worth, when you simply exist in your natural magnificence, something changes in the universe. Men feel this energetic shift and are naturally attracted to it. Not because you're playing games or using strategies, but because you're vibrating at the frequency of mature, self-assured love. The Archangel shows me that there are 2 types of feminine love. Needy love, which seeks validation and external confirmation, and sovereign love, which loves because it's abundant, not because it's needy. Needy love scares men, especially those who are already afraid. But sovereign love reassures them, inspires them, makes them want to become better versions of themselves. Gabriel tells me about Rosa, 47 years old, who was exhausted from trying to understand if her coworker felt something for her. She decided to follow angelic guidance and completely changed her approach. Instead of analyzing whether he looked at her differently, whether he was being too kind or too cold, Rosa began focusing on being the best version of herself. She invested in her dreams, strengthened her friendships, developed new talents. Curiously, the more Rosa focused on herself, the more her colleague began to approach. He started seeking her out for conversations that had nothing to do with work. He began asking about her personal life, her dreams, her plans. His resistance began to diminish because Rosa was no longer pressuring, no longer emanating energy of need. She was simply being wonderful, and that was irresistible. The Archangel reveals to me that this is the secret that wise women know. When you stop needing someone to love you to feel complete, you become magnetic. When you stop trying to prove you're worthy of love and start living as if you already know you're a divine gift, everything changes. The man who was afraid to get close suddenly feels it's safe to love you, because you're not desperate for love. You are love. Gabriel whispers to me that there's a fundamental difference between giving up out of bitterness and surrendering out of wisdom. Giving up out of bitterness is closing your heart, building walls, deciding love isn't worth it. But surrendering out of wisdom is opening your heart even more, loving without conditions, trusting in divine timing. It's saying, I love you, but I don't need you to love me back for me to be happy. The Archangel shows me that when you reach this level of emotional maturity, 3 things can happen, and all are blessings. First possibility, he overcomes his fears and surrenders to the love he feels for you. Second possibility, he can't overcome his fears, but you're already so fulfilled that it doesn't destroy you, and soon after, the universe brings someone even better into your life. Third possibility, you discover you didn't need him to be happy and find even greater happiness in your own company and other relationships. Gabriel tells me about Vera, 50 years old, who lived this transformation. She loved a man for 3 years, a man who always kept her in uncertainty. When Vera finally applied angelic wisdom and stopped chasing confirmation, 2 wonderful things happened. First, she discovered an inner peace she had never experienced. Second, the man began chasing her, confused by her energy shift, wanting to understand why she was no longer running after him. But the most beautiful thing about Vera's story is that when he finally declared himself, she had grown so much that she could consciously choose whether or not she wanted that relationship. She didn't accept out of desperation or neediness, but out of true and conscious love. And that made all the difference in the quality of the relationship they built together. Archangel Gabriel asks me to end this message with a special blessing for you. May you remember that your worth doesn't diminish based on someone's inability to recognize it. May you trust in divine timing, knowing that true love always finds its way. May you allow yourself to love without fear, without conditions, without guarantees, because it's by loving that you connect with your divine nature. Gabriel whispers that you are a rare gift in this world, a soul that loves deeply in a time when many are afraid to feel. This capacity of yours to love isn't weakness, it's power. Use this power with wisdom, directing it first to yourself, then to the world, and trust that when you're radiating self-love and completeness, external love will come naturally, at the right time, with the right person, in the right way.